In almost every church, there's someone who has a passion for orphans ministry and wants to help others in their church get involved through adoption, caring for children, and supporting children in the United States foster care system.
And maybe in your church, that person is you. One of our goals at Hope for Orphans is to help you and your church reach orphans and waiting children in hundreds of ways.
One of the most common questions we get from people who are passionate about orphans is how they can get an orphans ministry started in their church.
Because of this, we've put together a book as well as a live workshop that walks through the basic 8 steps of launching an orphans ministry in your church.
Now, to tell you the truth, it would take all day for us to walk you through everything, but we want to give you a quick overview of these 8 steps right now. Let's get started.
All right, people, let's rock.
The first thing you'll need to do is find a leader in your church that can help you navigate the waters as you move forward. Every church is different, and you'll need to find someone in leadership that knows how to get things done in your church.
I think as we came into our church leadership, we came in, hopefully humbly and softly, and not saying we're demanding, but just saying we'd like to ask permission if we can start meeting and start praying together as a team of people who have the passion for this.
As leaders of the church, our role was to try to incubate that as best we could, to facilitate it as best as we could without having to have control over it.
At many churches, if new things, if new direction or a new passion gets dumped on the pastoral staff that's there, a lot of times it's not going to go anywhere really fast because they're so overloaded as it is. They can't do it all.
Honestly, your church leaders are probably going to be surprised when you tell them that you're simply asking for their guidance and that you're not asking them to lead this ministry.
Now look around your church and find like-minded people and ask them to come together.
I would call it a grassroots, or bubbling up from the bottom, so to speak, from individual church members who had a heart for adoption and a passion for adoption and orphan care, and just started doing things on their own.
These may be adoptive or foster parents in your church. They may be people who work in the child welfare system. They could be teachers. They could be folks who've been on mission trips to overseas orphanages. It could be anyone who has a heart for orphans and waiting children.
And we began by getting a group together that we knew had a heart for missions and a heart for kids. And we just began praying and asking the Lord to lead, to open doors and to close doors, to bring the people who also had a heart.
Remember, you are not in this just to do good things for orphans. Your goal is to discover God's invitation for how your church is supposed to be involved in orphans ministry. He has a plan for you and your church. Prayer is crucial if you're going to get on board with that plan.
This next part of the process is a lot of fun. You and your team get together, have pizza, and start brainstorming. This is a time for thinking outside the box. No idea is a bad idea. In fact, at this stage, the more wild and unrealistic the dream, the better.
I think we don't want to dream outside our little boxes of what we can accomplish in the flesh. Eyes have not seen and ears have not heard what God has planned. And are we willing to ask for things that are bigger than we can accomplish?
You know what? There's going to be time for being practical later on. Some of the most wonderful things happening in orphans ministry started out as naive dreams and unrealistic goals. As you throw out idea after idea, you'll begin to see certain common themes coming up. Pay attention to those themes. God may be telling you something about the direction your ministry should be taking.
We've discovered that most orphan ministries focus on at least one of the 3 channels: orphan care, adoption, and foster care. So how do you decide what your church should focus on? The best way is to look at what God is already doing in your church.
When I look out over our congregation, I see an unusual high percentage of people who have been involved in orphan care and adoption in our body. And for me, I don't look at that as an accident. I look at that as God bringing together a group of people that He's going to use in some particular way.
Let's say you have a strong missions partnership with a sister church in Uganda. Or maybe your church has attracted dozens of adopted families. Or perhaps you have a well-run mentoring program that will work great for teens in foster care. You may not realize it, but God has already been preparing your church for orphan ministry. The key is to keep your eyes open for where He is already working in your church.
At this point, it's time to look a few years down the road and ask, what would you like to see in your orphans ministry? Then you're going to want to set some clear goals based on your objectives.
I think it's important to be very specific, to say we want to take 500 people on a mission trip to orphanages around the world this year. We want to adopt 100 children. We would like to have 1,000 hours this year of our people's volunteer time in community service to a boys' home or a children's home. The key thing is that you know what the goal is and you know when you've accomplished that.
Now don't forget to keep praying as you have been throughout. The last thing you want to do is start making your plans apart from God's leading.
Now, you want to ask your key church leader from step 1 if there is already a leadership structure model in place for new ministries at your church.
And the decision was made to have a committee, a leadership team that would be the ones who owned it for the church.
The main thing is that you want to establish a leadership structure that doesn't just depend on 1 or 2 individuals to run it all. If your ministry is going to be effective over the long term, a solid leadership structure with clearly defined roles will be crucial.
Now, it's time to take all the pieces from the process so far and put them in one well-written proposal. This is a time that you share with your church leadership an overview of what your team has done and where you'd like the ministry to go.
The thing you got to remember is that those men sitting around that table, there's more things coming at them in the life of a church than any of the lay people in the church can imagine.
You'll want to have as many of the answers to their questions as possible, so ask yourself in advance what you think they might be concerned about.
Ted made the comment to me, he said, Scott, you're already in the museum and we're still on the bus. You know, you've got to bring us along.
It'll be important for you to cast a vision for them, but equally important that you stress to them that you're not asking for anything from them other than their blessing. Make sure to tell them that you're ready to go as soon as they give you the go-ahead.
It was very easy for us as leaders of that church to endorse the ministry. So the passion with which they presented this ministry was just outstanding. And I mean, there wasn't anybody doubting for a minute that they were called to do this.
Now that you've come this far, it's time to kick off your church's orphans ministry.
We had to launch this thing. We had to make sure that the people in the church knew that this was now an outreach, a ministry of our church.
Many churches plan a launch Sunday. This is a chance to communicate God's heart for the orphan to your entire church. At this stage, it will be important to announce a short-term project that your entire church can get behind. This will provide visibility for your ministry and will raise awareness in the whole church about the need.
When the Sunday actually came where they presented the ministry, it was a lot like watching the birth of a child in some ways, because it was just very gratifying to see the leaders of this ministry stand before the body and to be able to present it so effectively.
Once you've launched and completed your church-wide project, it's time to roll up your sleeves, start on your strategic plan, and get ready to hang on.
For most people, the hardest steps in launching an orphans ministry are the first ones. But once you get started, you'll be surprised at what God has in store. God has a plan for you and your church to do incredible things that will change children's lives now and for eternity.
To learn more about these 8 steps and the resources available to you as you launch your church's orphans ministry, visit hopefororphans.org. We look forward to serving you and hearing how God will use you and your church and the lives of countless children.